there, one kite. I'm already into the 420, damn it.
So what are you doing? Nothing? Why not?
Trying to get on this Lifestyle Radio website.
Sounds like a cool website.
Yeah, it's alright. Oh, wait, I might have it.
You might have it.
You're listening to Lifestyle Radio.
The opinions expressed during this show are those of the individual participants and do not necessarily reflect the opinions of their associated organizations or Lifestyle Radio.
Giggly thing. Oh my lord.
Man, what's the matter with that cat there?
Must be full of reefer.
Full of reefer?
Yeah, man.
You mean that cat's high?
Sailing.
Sailing?
Lightly.
We now wander off the beaten path with an update from the Reefer Reporter.
Hello and welcome to the live broadcast. Yes, we're live. You can't tell. Oh, the Reefer Reporters. Yeah, we're at lifestyleradio.net. This week we are covering the Canadian and international cannabis news from the week of March the 6th through March the 12th of 2018. And thanks for tuning into the program. All right, Kim. You love live radio.
Gotta love live radio, I tell you. It's been one hell of a week in radio world and in the news world around the globe for the last 7 days.
Oh, I know. We were discussing before we came live that how hard it was to pick news stories for this week.
Yeah, it was difficult to whittle them down to fit into the time space that we have for today's show. There's just so much going on, so let's get started right off the top, right here in good old Canada.
Yes, and even a little closer, right here in good old Ontario, with this LCBO released the logo for the new cannabis stores that they will be running.
Yes, LCBO unveiled the brand new logo as part of the plan to legalize cannabis on a national level. Ontario has come out and with their commissioned cannabis store logo. And yes, the country is abuzz about this Ontario logo.
Yes, for $650,000, we got a circle with OSC in the center and the words Ontario Cannabis Store down beside it.
Black and white. Plain Jane, a very simple circle that my granddaughter could have made on a computer for them.
Yes, she could have. It's receiving mixed reactions from insiders in the industry, social media. Some people are calling it boring. It's, well, like I said, they're calling it boring, and that's really, in a way, what the government wanted. They didn't want anything flashy. And they got something pretty tall.
Yeah, I don't understand how it can cost such an astronomical amount of money for something boring. If the entire task of this project was for boring, why not just get somebody in the office to whip it up?
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, this is taxpayers' dollars that went to pay for this thing. It's the whole thing is just completely outrageous to me that it could cost this amount of money for a simple black and white logo.
Well, one of the supporters of it is John Fowler. He's the CEO and founder of Supreme Cannabis. He believes that it's good. He thinks that after a few years, it'll just be like the LCBO is to everybody. Everybody be saying OCS. I think this is a good example.
Mr. Fowler, I think, is going to be sadly mistaken in the long run. I don't believe that any advertising firm anywhere will tell you Plain Jane is the way to go to catch somebody's eye.
Yeah. He goes on to say that I think a lot of people who are looking for a brand to be exciting name and exciting logo are underwhelmed by this. And yeah, there are a lot of people who are underwhelmed by it.
Yeah, I'm underwhelmed by the logo, but I'm more overwhelmed by the cost of the logo. Once again, I come back to that because to me, that's the major issue here. We're talking almost, $750,000 of taxpayers' money to go to pay for a logo that is being described as underwhelming at best.
Yeah, no. Unfortunately,
it doesn't seem like a good bang for your buck to me.
Well, I've got to believe it's got more than just coming up with this artwork. There's got to be more to this.
Well, they were commissioned to create a logo, and this is a logo. So, I mean, but then again, when you're talking about government, a hammer costs you $500.
Right.
So,
yeah.
there you go.
Yeah, it's pretty plain, just black and white.
Yeah.
There hasn't been used any color in it. So.
Yeah, a hammer might be in order for this one, in my opinion.
Well, there might be a reason behind all that. Because according to another article, the Ontario Retail Board, the Cannabis Retail Board, they've got no experience.
Yeah. The second story that's in relation to this, Ontario unveiled their board, and it turns out that not a single member of this board of the Ontario Cannabis Stores Association, not a single member has any experience with cannabis or cannabis sales. No.
You would think somebody would have some type of experience. To get two executives from CAMH, somebody from a Toronto hospital, a lawyer, and a resource executive.
Yeah, the Toronto hospital is St. Joe's. St. Joseph's Hospital, the mental health facility there, is only second to CAMH in the city of Toronto. They have a very extensive mental health branch at St. Joseph's Hospital, and they work closely in conjunction with CAMH. And it's the only public hospital in Ontario that has that distinction. So I don't know if that has something to do with the reasoning put with this is because of the addictions aspect of it. But once again, I come back to cannabis is non-addictive. We have a endocannabinoid system in our body. It's actually a nutrient to our body. So why these are being lumped together by our government officials, I still don't understand.
Well, even here in the article, there's a quote by our good friend Abby Roach. She's with the Hot Box Cafe and the Cannabis Friendly Business Association, and she tells her that it's more along the line of looking at through a prohibitionist lens, and it's not interested in seeing the business succeed. There's nobody on the board that's ever sold cannabis before.
Yeah.
Have they ever talked to a cannabis consumer, she wonders?
Yeah. And these are all excellent questions by Abby. Abby is at the forefront of the business association down in Southern Ontario in Toronto. She heads it up for all of Ontario, but I mean, the hub of all of this is happening in Toronto where Abby is. She's operated a business for almost 2 decades in Toronto and Kensington market. And any business, that new venture that is getting up and running in today's market, how can you expect it to succeed if you don't have anybody that has any experience in the industry to start with? It just doesn't make any sense.
Yeah. Oh, yes. We've seen that in other parts within the cannabis industry where there's businesses that are starting and people don't have any experience, and
it's doomed to fail.
It's doomed
to fail.
Yeah.
One more notch in the bridge to failure for these guys.
Yeah. Talking about cannabis industries, as we move on to our next story, we got one executive who's offering up some money.
Yes, Mr. Chuck Rafisi, the CEO of cannabis industry investment firm Wheaton Corp, and the former CFO of the Liberal Party of Canada, of course, said he would like to donate $25,000 to a fund that will challenge the legality of future law impairment charges against people for being impaired by cannabis.
Yes, and he likes to see them base a policy that is fact-based, not one that's not based on facts.
Yeah, a lot of people have a lot of things to say about Mr. Rafisi being who he is and how he got into this government. but at least this is a step in a good direction on his part, in my opinion. The guy, he's not a favorite to those in the cannabis community, that's for sure. But I like this initiative. Somebody needed to do something, and I'm glad that he stepped up.
Yeah, in one of the articles I had read about this, he had mentioned that, it's $25,000 he's putting up, and he hopes that others join in.
Yep, that's right. I mean, let's face it, the man can afford it. It's 25 grand. But hopefully the initiative will go further into the cannabis community and amongst other LPs, and we can get some other people involved in this that are making the big bucks in the industry nowadays and challenge these laws. Because, let's face it, LPs are the ones that supply patients in Canada with their medication. If no patient is able to drive a vehicle, which is what this law is going to come down to, no patient will legally be able to drive a vehicle. That's going to drive down their sales because people have to work.
Yeah, exactly. And they don't want their patients, ending up in jail because they consumed cannabis 3 or 4 days ago.
That's right. That's right. And the way the laws are written right now, patients won't be able to consume and carry on a regular lifestyle. We will get blown over or whatever the case is, the mouth swab, the blow test, whatever it's going to be. We're going to go over the legal limit if you're a regular use patient. And most patients are in the position where they shouldn't be driving if they haven't blown over, because that means they don't have enough in their system to stop the seizures or whatever it is that's occurring in their medical condition. Yeah. That keeps them allowing them to drive. So it's a catch-22 for patients, and that's not being allowed for in the framework with legalization, and it needs to be fought.
Yeah, well, BC lawyer John Conroy, as we all know very well, he says that no doubt that there will be challenges to the impaired driving legislation. And he can see these potentially as Section 7 charter rights violations, where they could argue that someone is charged with cannabis impaired driving was deprived of the liberty in a way that's not accordant with the principles of fundamental justice. And, that's just giving an arbitrary number, that 5 milligrams or nanograms.
Yep, that's right. And we know now, the science tells us those numbers are meaningless. There is no one base level that you can say across the board for everybody they are impaired at that level. All these numbers do is prove use and consumption. They do not prove impairment. Yeah,
and Kirk Tousaw, he's spoken up too and says that the law may violate Section 8 due to the invasive nature of blood testing, which I believe is probably something along the way when they stopped blood testing for alcohol.
That's right, because it's against the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. It's an invasive test that if you choose not to have a bodily fluid forcibly extracted from your body, you have the right in this country to say, no, I do not want that. And nobody can force you to do it. So this will violate that.
Yeah, it sure will. Well, it'll be interesting to see what happens. I can just see the, those are ones who were charged early on. People will be looking to see if they're headed off to court and putting up a challenge for this.
Absolutely. More to come on the legal front with that, for sure. I'm glad that a fund has gotten started for that, and I encourage other companies to donate to that fund for the future challenges that will sure to happen.
That's right. All right. Talking about funds and money, I see here in our next story, the First Nations are demanding a cut of the cannabis tax after legalization.
Another one with their hand out to the feds. Kind of see their point, though. Manny Jules, Chief Commissioner of the First Nations Tax Commission, is saying that, you consulted with the provinces, you consulted with the territories, but you didn't consult with First Nations, and this is going to affect us as well.
Yes, First Nations says that the governments also face challenges, just like the other police forces across the country, and they in province, and they should be also compensated. Their proposal is that Ottawa and the provinces would concede ground to First Nations to collect taxes and provide some much-needed revenue for these communities. and the funds could be used to develop cannabis-related laws and regulations on the reserve. Fund campaigns to educate young people and help with the police forces. So, it's no different.
It's absolutely correct. It is no different. First Nations lands have their own independent police forces. They have their own independent laws. They're not governed by provincial laws or federal laws, for that matter. They make their own rules and they solve their own problems on their own lands. So that makes them a separate entity just as much as an individual province. So why shouldn't they get what our other provinces are getting as well?
Yeah, that's right. If they're not covered by the provincial police, then and they're looked after by their own police forces, then I think they should be approaching governments for part of the pie in order to help with enforcement and education. Absolutely.
Yep. Just like any other, they're entitled to it in my opinion, for sure.
Yeah, exactly. What do we got there for time? Oh, we're not ready for break yet.
Not quite yet. We got one more story at least we can get in, and I'd kind of like to fly down south for a little bit.
And this one relates to taxes as well.
It sure does. We're going to head right on down to Baton Rouge, Louisiana, the next state in the country of the United States of America that is jumping on the bandwagon for legalization.
Yes, they are. They say they don't know how much they're going to collect, but they understand it could be hundreds of millions of dollars.
Yeah, they are definitely in it for the tax revenue. They're looking at other states down there like Colorado and Washington and saying, hey, you know what? Our state can use this kind of a windfall too. So let's legalize it, and we're going to charge pretty much what we charge by the package of cigarettes down here. We'll get the same thing off of cannabis.
Yeah, $1.08 per pack. $1 for a pack. Like here, our government is talking about $1 a gram. They're talking about $1 for a pack of cannabis cigarettes, which if I'm assuming might be modeled on the cigarettes packaging. Would that be like 20 joints for $1 worth of tax?
I don't know, but that's what they're looking at for their model, is the same thing as cigarettes. And that's what they get for a pack of smokes down there for tobacco cigarettes. $1.08 per pack in tax. So, I mean, that'd be awesome if our government was looking at that kind of a increase for us as well.
Yeah. Yes, it would. And they go on to say that, it's odd to don't be naive to think that people aren't consuming cannabis. Why have them do it underground when you can bring it up the surface, collect all that money.
Yep, collect the money. Louisiana it's a hurting state right now. They're having issues down there with housing and with everything else, and they're seeing the good things happening in states like Colorado, where homelessness is going down, more money for shelters, schools are benefiting. All kinds of places like that. Senior citizens' homes are benefiting. There's more resources available. And this is very, very attractive to states like Louisiana. So they're next on the bandwagon, and they said, hey, we want some of that tax revenue too.
Yeah. Well, it's good to see that other states are going this route, legalization, being that, way Jeff Sessions has been talking. And you don't know what the Trump's government's going to do. And so it's good to see that states aren't waiting. They're still moving ahead.
Absolutely. They're saying, well, you know what? Other states have done it. We're doing it too. And if the entire country winds up legal, all except for a small handful of provinces, that's going to leave the feds with some pretty tied hands.
Yes, it is. It is. Well, Kim, before we go to break, why don't we do one more trip? One more trip across the ocean.
Way across the ocean. Gonna have to jump on the old Concorde for that one if it was still around, for sure. Going right out to the UK, and this one involves Canada.
There's got to be a cannabis-friendly airline out there somewhere, isn't it?
Hopefully soon.
Is a vapor lounge on board?
Hopefully soon. But we're going to head out to the UK, and this one does involve Canada as well, and a little bit of a comparison. And we kind of got knocked off a chart by the United Kingdom.
Yeah, we did. Like, I read this headline, I went, what? But yeah, apparently the UK topped Canada as the number one cannabis producer in 2016.
Yeah, Canada got bumped. We no longer produce the world's largest amount of cannabis for that year. 2017 stats aren't quite in yet, and they may change the story once again. But for 2016, the UK did beat us out. Now, that was largely in part to the production of the pharmaceutical product Sativex, which is produced in the UK, and they also are developing a secondary one called Epidolex. Now these are cannabis infusions that are available by prescription.
Yes. And I was surprised because this is all just legal cannabis. This isn't counting the illegal stuff. This is all legal stuff. 95,000 kilograms for the UK and 80,000, almost 81,000 here in Canada.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, and the UK was also the world's top legal cannabis exporter as well.
Yeah, that's right. At the end of
cannabis a commodity that they're now trading on the open market.
Yeah. I mean, we've gone leaps and bounds over the last couple of years for sure. I mean, this stats are from 2016. So at the end of 2016, Canada only had 40 licensed producers operating under Health Canada's right to access. By the end of 2017, that number doubled to more than 80. So the stats will more than likely change for 2017 as well.
Oh, yeah. And there's a lot more patients now that are accessing the program for the medical cannabis. So, that's going to be used up, increase the numbers for sure.
Yeah. Absolutely. And not to even mention the amounts of cannabis that are being exported these days from Canada. For example, Aurora Cannabis exported over $2.5 million worth of cannabis to German facilities in 2017.
Wow. I don't know about any, I don't hear about it as often, but hopefully there's no patients out there that are from these companies that are going without their cannabis because they've decided to ship it to another market.
Well, we already know that's happening, sadly, but that's another news story.
Yeah. That's right. Okay, well, why don't we take that break now?
Sounds like a plan.
Okay, all right, we'll take the break. Kim, don't forget, when we come back from the break, you're going to have your moment in cannabis history, right?
Yes, that's correct, and it's a fun one today.
Yeah, good. Okay. Well, this week for our little news blurb here in our break, you're going to hear a BBS news report about the recreational and medicinal cannabis in Uruguay, and you also hear a bit of "Great When You're High" by the Cottonmouth Kings, plus Kim's little Canada history break, and you're listening to the Reefer Reporters. We are live here at LifestyleRadio.net.
Hey, this is Cheech.
And this is Chong.
And you're listening to Lifestyle Radio. What is it? Lifestyle Radio. Say it one more time.
420 Radio?
Ooh.
Hang up and try again.
You're listening to Lifestyle Radio. You're listening to Lifestyle Radio.
It's the kind of thing that could land you in serious trouble in most countries. But here in Uruguay, growing, selling and consuming cannabis is now legal. The first country in the world to opt for full legalization.
This is Chocolate number 6, LA Confidential.
The law allows a cannabis club to have as many as 99 plants of varying strengths and properties. And supporters deny charges it'll boost the illegal trade in drugs. Quite the opposite.
The best way of fighting the crime is this, attacking the business, not the people who consumes, not the user or the grower. You need to attack the business in taking customers away from crime.
Supporters say this is much more than a hippie's charter, a license to get high. Uruguay is now in a unique position to develop and exploit the commercial and medicinal uses of cannabis as well. Just across the border in Brazil, Margarete Brito is frustrated. She knows that cannabis extract, or CBD, helps cut the number of Sophia's epileptic attacks. But getting hold of CBD isn't easy, and there's certainly no off-the-shelf remedy.
I'm always trying to find people who are traveling so that they can bring it in for me. And when I can't get hold of it, we have to find a courier.
What's in here is a dilution of 3 parts olive oil to 1 part cannabinoid oil.
Even in some US states like Colorado, where cannabis is legal, federal law prohibits medical trials with the drug. So some producers are here in Uruguay.
Once we move beyond anecdotal evidence through the clinical trials about to happen in Uruguay, everything that happens here is going to be watched very carefully by other countries, and I believe they will follow suit if good results are found.
By awarding licenses to 2 companies to grow cannabis commercially, Uruguay's radical marijuana legislation is now almost complete. New businesses are growing, and in addition to medical trials, tax revenues could be worth millions. Many other countries are keeping a close eye on Uruguay's controversial experiment with weed. Willow Davis, BBC News, Montevideo.
Are you looking for cannabis news, education, and people's opinions? Are you looking to learn what Canadian and international cannabis advocates are doing, not only now, but what got them to this point in their lives, and what does the future hold for them? Do you want to learn how patients are using cannabis as a daily medication, or learn how their cannabis use helps them with their medical condition? If you answered yes to any of these questions, then I'm going to suggest to you to tune in to Lifestyle Radio. Catch their live weekly shows and have your questions and concerns answered, and find the experience you're looking for. Monday, catch your weekly news broadcast with the Reefer Reporters. Then on Wednesday, get several hours worth of cannabis public education. We get things started with cannabis and coffee with Tamarawana. Then tune in and catch Pottawa with Russell Barth, who calls himself the world's angriest pothead. Finish up your evening with the award-winning Pace Radio Show with Al Graham and joint host Kim Cooper and Alicia Yashishin. No week would be complete without tuning into Friday night's program, the 420 Radio Show, featuring Al Rapp and the 420 Radio crew, Mary Jane Baker and Marcel Gignac. Cannabis is a lifestyle, and you can catch all your cannabis lifestyle information right here at lifestyleradio.net or at our sister site, 420radio.ca.
I'm so fucking loaded.
Let's get higher, take me higher. Let's get higher, take me higher. It's that left coast maniac, back on the loose with a pound of the chronic and a pint full of juice. Juice on my lap, always strapped with a glass piece. High as a kite, out of sight from the police. Dead grease, rolling like a rebel. Old school punk rock, horny white devil.
Hey, we're back from the break, and as always, a quick medication session. But before we get back to the news, it's time for Kim's Canon History Moment. What do we got for today, Kim?
Yes, this week I'm going to talk about some famous people in cannabis history, the ones and the only that got us all on the map with laughing a gut, and that's Cheech and Chong. Many people may be unaware that Tommy Chong was originally born in Alberta. Yes, he's Canadian. He migrated to Vancouver, in the city of Vancouver, way back in the late 50s. In the early 60s, he started opening up some clubs and transformed from music clubs to comedy clubs when he fell in love with comedy. When he had a comedy club going one day, Cheech Marin walked in the door and they met and they hit it off famously, and Tommy offered him a job. Soon they were doing some skits up on the stage, and they were doing impressions of a real life officer that was busting many members of the cannabis community in Vancouver at that time. This officer's name was Sergeant Studenko. His real name, Abe Snidenko. Yeah, it was a Vancouver narcotics officer. And that's how Cheech and Chong started their skits, getting famous, and became the men they are today in history.
Cool. That's interesting. That's when you were saying about this officer, I thought, he's probably that same guy that's in the records. Well,
he is. And it's a real life Vancouver narcotics officer that was causing the cannabis community some hassles in the early 60s. And that took place in 1969. So
wow.
49 years ago.
Wow, that's a while ago. And they're still touring too, right?
Yes, they are. Yes, they are.
Yeah, actually, they are just through here in Ontario, and I believe they are now doing an announcement here at Lifestyle Radio.
Yes, they are, and that was very exciting to see a member of Lifestyle Radio get to meet Tommy in person. I had the opportunity to party with Tommy several years ago, many, many moons ago. Great guy, him and his wife.
Okay. Yes, they are. Well, Kim, we got to go from history to making history.
Yes.
Yes, and that is in Quebec. Here, this whole next segment is a whole pile of banning going on, and that includes in Quebec. This is where they want to ban smoking not only of cannabis, but also of tobacco on the municipality's sidewalks.
Yeah, we're hearing a lot in the news these days about, different places that are wanting bans, such as parks and condos and apartments. And, well, here we've got an entire town that wants to ban smoking. They say if you own your property or your dwelling, they're not going to stop you from doing what you want in your own home, in your own backyard. But other than that, we don't want it on our streets, parks, or anywhere.
Yeah, Hampstead, Quebec. It's a small town of 7,100 people. They have a draft bylaw that would prevent people from smoking cannabis on the sidewalks, including the streets.
Yeah.
You couldn't even cross the road smoking a joint because you'd be breaking the law. Smoking and crossing the street.
Yeah. Now, we're not sure how much of cannabis this will encompass. Will it encompass vaporizing as well? We'll have to wait and see. Many people many communities and many policies are encompassing vaporizing with cannabis. So will this include people that are walking down the street vaping? We'll have to wait and see. But more than likely.
Well, according to a senior policy analyst for the Canadian Cancer Society, he says that this is the first time this has ever happened in Canada. It's the first municipality to ban smoking on the roads and sidewalks, and he expects other municipalities to follow suit. He says the legalization of marijuana is going to prompt for municipalities to consider these issues.
I don't know. I don't know. Does this fall under Fed legalization laws the same as what I'm referencing Quebec here? They talked about saying, well, we're not going to allow growing. And the feds are saying, well, you're allowed to grow federally, so you can't stop people from growing. Is this not the same thing?
Yeah, I would think so, because there's so much right now, like we were talking in the first segment about, the banning in on the balconies, banning in condos and people's in rented homes. And yet, they turn around and say, well, one of the reasons why they can do this is because people can consume in their own homes. Well, no, they can't.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. If your condominium bans it, but we're going to get to all of that. But this is an entire town.
Yeah.
And really, really unusual.
Yeah, it is. Well, it's gonna end up back in the courts. It'll be a court challenge if it goes through. And,
I think so. I can't see every member of an entire town being okay with this.
Yeah, neither can I. But
something to watch.
Yeah, it is. It's something that I think we're going to have to watch. They're going to vote on this in April, and it'll be something that we're going to have to watch for sure.
Yeah, but pot bans abound. Like we were talking about there, they're going into condos and apartments and everything else, seeing this problem right here in Ontario too.
Yes, yeah. Well, I heard I was saying this first segment. And we've talked about this in the past.
Yes, we have.
And apartments and balconies, and Ottawa, the city of Ottawa, their public health agency, they want to do the same thing.
Yeah. The next story that we're getting to is coming to us out of CBC News, Ottawa. They had it out earlier this week. City of Ottawa, Public Health Agency, recommending banning smoking and vaping of cannabis inside all condos and apartments, including balconies.
Yes, exactly. Like, it's just, they say it's a reasonable policy because secondhand smoke can disperse through the buildings, travel between adjacent units through cracks in the walls, and in the ceilings, windows, and heating and ventilation systems. Now, what kind of condominium do you have if you've got all these major cracks in the walls that cannabis smoke is going to go through them?
Yeah, I mean, the whole thing is just a little bit ridiculous. Anybody that knows anything about cannabis smoke knows that it dissipates fairly quickly. And especially if you're vaporizing, then there is no smoke. It's only vapor. And that will not travel through your walls and such. The only thing that could perhaps travel is some smell. Now, if we're going to be of the mindset where we're going to start banning smells, then we're in serious trouble.
Big time. And you know what? This isn't just about banning cannabis smoke in your apartment or in your condo. They also want to ban tobacco and shisha products from being, it says any and all combustible products, according to the Ontario Public Health Unit, should be banned within these units.
You're stopping people from living. We live in an age where a large majority of the population live in these multi-unit dwellings. You cannot restrict people from living their normal lifestyle when they're paying for that dwelling.
Yeah, especially when you're paying hundreds of thousands of dollars, and then you turn around. Well, obviously, the person would have to know that before they actually bought it, hopefully.
Yeah. But I mean, now it's into discrimination. You're discriminating. I mean, what about people like me? I burn incense. There are people that, combustibles you burn, Sikhs burn stuff, they're shisha bricks, and it's a religious thing. So now you're discriminating against people that practice certain religions because they burn combustibles for their religion, and they're not allowed to do that in their home. You're stepping on all kinds of toes here.
And if they're doing all this, I can't see them opening up a consumption lounge, lounge for them. And as far as edibles, what are they going to do down the road?
Yeah. It's not going to stop people from consuming cannabis. If that's the end goal here, then it's not going to succeed. Other than that, I don't see what the end goal of this entire process would be. We've talked about it before, how perfumes, air fresheners, strong spicy odors, these are all smells that some people find offensive. You cannot outlaw smell.
No, you can't. You can outlaw body odor.
Yeah.
Now their program manager of the OPH, he says that whether you're on a balcony or whether you're inside, there's cross ventilation, and if you're in a balcony, next door, then that cannabis smoke is going to go to that person. And they said that looking at the evidence, we're saying this, at this point, it's not safe to be doing these things in a multi-unit dwelling. Well, what evidence is there that it's not safe to consume cannabis in a multi-unit dwelling?
Yeah, there is no evidence.
Cannabis
that's ridiculous. That's just totally ridiculous statement, and it's factless. I mean, we need to have fact-based evidence here, people, not just somebody's opinion on it being squared off as fact. If we can consume cannabis in our backyard or on my front porch, and my house is attached to the house next door, and they're sitting on their deck and I'm sitting on my deck, it's got just as much of access to travel to theirs, and that's not unsafe. So how can it be on a balcony?
Well, a spokesperson for the Marijuana Party of Canada says it absolutely makes no sense. The ban applies to people who don't own their own home. So the ban is for poor people. The ban is for marginalized people, but rich people can do whatever they want. And he goes on and says, I burn incense. Are they going to try to ban that as well?
That's right. It can be classed as a combustible, the same as shisha bricks or anything else. the whole thing is just it's out of control.
Yeah, a lot more court cases coming up, people. That's for sure.
That's for sure. And we had more people chiming in on the same subject, coming to us out of the Ottawa Citizen. We heard from a friend of the show as well, from Normal Canada. Executive Director Craig Jones was discussing the same situation with them over there.
He was he?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, go ahead.
How do you, he asked, like, how are you going to enforce those things? Are you going to create a standalone separate police agency to enforce balcony prohibitions?
Good question.
Good question, Craig. Yeah.
Good question. How are you going to enforce it? It can't be enforced. The whole thing is just exhausted. Jonathan Zaid also chimed in on this, and he said, the one court case that could come up, and the one issue with all of this as well, is many patients use medical marijuana and they have mobility issues. There's no way that they can go outside or designated areas or anything like that to consume their medication. And patients who shouldn't be forced on the street to start with to consume a medication that's been prescribed by a doctor. So are you going to be instituting these same rules for patients? Then that for sure will meet with a court case.
Yeah, well, the Ottawa's acting medical officer, they say that the available evidence on cannabis smoke demonstrates that it contains tar, fine particulate matter, and many of the same harmful chemicals and cancer-causing agents as tobacco.
Once again, where is this person getting their information?
Like, how many... We don't have firsthand cannabis smokers dying of cancer. How do we get secondhand and not firsthand, people?
Cannabis is used to cure or to at least alleviate the symptoms and put into remission many cancers for many people. It has never been proven to be carcinogenic where it's causing cancer. Not one study has shown cannabis to cause cancer. Yeah. So I don't understand how these people can spout this rhetoric and have all of this just non-fact-based retarded information out there. It's just ridiculous.
And then there's the fact on the medical cannabis user that's in all this, and there's Jonathan Zand, executive director at the Canadians for Fair Access to Medical Marijuana. He says that it's ludicrous that this is happening. And quite frankly, he's out of touch with the rights of medical cannabis patients to use cannabis in their own homes. There's a duty to accommodate people who have disabilities or medical needs.
Absolutely, 100%. So this is a developing situation in Ontario, and I imagine many provinces out there that are grappling with this right now as well. There's a big push on both sides. And I can see this playing out in the courts.
Yeah, so can I. And I know of, Ontario, we've seen it here where they've taken up looking for information on what people think for cannabis lounges, which would help alleviate a lot of these concerns for people who, can't even consume cannabis on the sidewalk, to be able to go to a place like a lounge. And here in Ontario, they're looking at that, and in BC, they've put off that decision on the lounges.
Yeah, that brings us right to our next story. CBC News out of British Columbia. Ted Smith made the cover of this story. Friend of the show, great humanitarian out there, doing many things at the Victoria Cannabis Buyers Club.
Yes, and actually, he was on the Pace Radio show where he was talking about that. They've been doing it for 20 years.
Yeah, they've had a safe consumption space for over 20 years. The condo that was beside him took them to the variance board and were there to speak out against having a brand new lounge open up, and they withdrew their application and they withdrew their complaint after they had found out that the lounge existed for 20 years and they didn't even know it was there.
Well, it's perfect shining example of how a lounge operates within the community.
Yeah, Exactly. You know, so people cry out about these places without even having the facts about them. And when they learn about them, their minds are definitely changed. So I encourage people to get the facts. And as far as Ted goes, keep going, buddy.
Oh, for sure. Well, yeah, you know, like he says, if they don't want people smoking in the parks or in the streets or in public places, then they should allow people to have commercial or non-profit venues where people can consume cannabis. Like it's obvious, it's not. Yeah.
The officials say they're focused on creating safe and reasonable retail cannabis sector, and they will consider the issue of consumption lounges, but not until the future.
Yeah. Well, this is Victoria Island. They have concerns about secondhand smoke and the potential health impacts of vaping.
But there hasn't been any potential health impacts about vaping when it was loaded up with nicotine for the last 5 years, where everybody's been vaping everywhere.
20 years at a lounge probably down the road from them, and they've never even heard of them. Yeah. And you think there's somebody, if there was a harm, or a bad impact from vaping, you would have heard about it by now.
Yeah, pretty sure we would have heard about something by now. These lounges have existed for 2 decades, from BC to Ontario. Yeah. Abby Roach has hers in Kensington Market, operating for 18 years. Ted Smith has been operating for 21 years. Yeah. They're a service to the community. They're a needed patient resource, and they need to be included in everybody's new regime.
Now, the City of Victoria, they think the idea is worth considering. They're doing public consultations on that. City Councillor Jeremy Loveday says he would like to see cannabis consumption spaces especially for medical marijuana consumers, but he's not against the recreational end of things, as long as they have, ventilation, which is something I would think that, would be part of a regularly end of things. Yeah. And, yeah, it's a place where people who are living in apartments, give them a place to go. So it's good to see a councillor on board in support of this.
Yeah, it's great. We've got a few of them, but they're few and far between, but there are a few outspoken proponents that are looking at this from a realistic point of view. And it is encouraging, and I hope it becomes contagious within our city governments.
Yeah, for sure. Because the more that these lounges are open and people are available to them, the better things will be for all of us.
For sure. Yeah, absolutely.
For sure. All right, Kim. Let's jump back on the plane and let's head back across the big pond.
Yeah, we're going to head way into the jungle of Brazil. We're looking at police investigation going on about a poor marijuana researcher, an aging marijuana researcher in Brazil, and a big outpouring of support for this man.
Sure is. No, I'm not even going to try to pronounce his first name. But, Mr. Carolini, he's 87 years old, is one of the pioneers of medical marijuana research. He's been investigating it since the 1950s. He has published several papers on the anti-compulsive properties of cannabinoids, and they've arrested him.
Yeah. This guy was the first scientist to isolate marijuana's hallucinogenic compound, and that we now know of as THC, way back in 1964. This guy has done numerous studies on cannabis as a medicine. He's researching now in his native home of Brazil, and I guess officials, somebody there in government, doesn't like what he's doing and now has him under investigation for inciting use.
Like this is ridiculous. 60 years of academic, research, and they're going after this guy because of that.
Yeah, they're saying that because of his papers and his continued research on it, he's inciting people to use the plant, the drug, cannabis, which remains currently illegal in that country.
Yeah, it says here on March 1st, researchers and students and staff gathered at campus to express their support for the researcher to protest against this. Like, this is more than 50 scientific studies societies have signed a petition supporting him.
Yeah. Yeah, he's received more than 28,000 signatures as of March 3rd. Among the supporters are Brazilian President Fernando Henrique Cardoso, who called the inquiry into Collini an unacceptable coercion.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. This is ridiculous.
Yeah. I mean, they're coercing him for sure. They're trying to force him to stop his scientific research by the threat of legal action. I mean, we thought this went out back in the 50s, but apparently it's alive and well in Brazil.
Yeah. Well, it's not illegal for them to study cannabis in Brazil, but the legislation does make it difficult. The institutions they can't grow it. They have to apply for special government permits.
It sounds like it's much the same as in the United States with going through NIDA and that kind of thing. So you've got to jump through a lot of hoops to get the product to actually test. So they make it extremely restrictive, even if it is legal to investigate and to do scientific research. It's extremely restrictive to do so. They don't make it easy.
Yeah, well, the professor says that he has fought for decades to show that cannabis is a serious plant. Dozens of countries have already regulated medical cannabis, and the current legislation in Brazil is a sham.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. It most certainly is. So we'll be keeping our eye on this. I'm glad to see the outpouring of support for this man. He's dedicated his life to the health and welfare of patients across the globe using a natural holistic plant that can work for us far better than pharmaceuticals. To see him treated in such a manner in any country is just despicable.
It sure is. It sure is. All right. Now, we've talked about the lounge situation, some people being banned and everything. And, how they're being banned. And also, we've also talked in the past about dispensaries and the raids here in Ontario.
Yes.
Yes, and it seems like things are continuing.
Yes, they are. We've got a news story coming to us from another past guest on the show. Had several of those today. Jonathan Hiltz was a former guest on our show last year. We interviewed him. He wrote at that time for marijuana.com. Jonathan is currently the director for Indiva, a licensed cannabis producer in Ontario. But he did write this last article for marijuana.com on the state of Ontario and lounges and the Enter Sensible Ontario campaign launched by Consumers and Retail Alliance of Canada.
Yeah. Sensible Ontario supports the lounges and private retail in Ontario by raising awareness of the different party platforms and public statements on cannabis regulations, according to Lisa Campbell. So it looks like, get ready, folks. We're going to hear a lot about the cannabis issue in the upcoming election.
Yes, we are. Sensible Ontario, much like Sensible BC that was launched by Dana Larson many years ago prior to an election out there. They're hoping, to make a big difference in the upcoming election in Ontario that we're having for premier by lobbying some of the candidates that are running for a government.
Yes. Well, Lisa went on to say that here in Ontario, we have cannabis retail we run by a government monopoly. We believe that is not enough to stop the black market. If we regulate cannabis like alcohol, that means in addition to government-run stores, we need licensed cannabis venues which can dispense cannabis. Bingo. Yeah. For sure. Like, nothing wrong with going to a lounge and saying, I'd like a gram of this or I'd like a gram of that, and then going back and using your vaporizer.
Yep, that's right. We go to bars right now. We buy a drink, we buy a shot, we buy a beer, we buy a mixed drink, whatever we're buying. There's no reason we can't have the same sort of consumption basis for cannabis. It will be a legal product by the end of this year. We need to allow for this type of a venue. I'm glad to see that Lisa also mentioned the upcoming 420 season, and I guess that's when they're going to be out in a full force launching their campaign.
Yes, they will. And I see here she notes that 2 of the progressive leadership candidates, now they've just had the vote, and Doug Ford won, but she says that 2 of the leadership candidates have endorsed private retail cannabis.
Yes.
And which is also supported by the Green Party as well.
Yeah. So, I mean, there's alternatives out there, people. We need to get rid of Kathleen Wynne. We need to jump on board with Sensible Ontario. If you're in the Ontario region, look up Sensible Ontario and throw your support behind them and this campaign. We want change here in this province, then we're going to have to fight for it.
Yes, that's right. That's right. And you know that this is very similar to the next story where they're talking about, selling in the retail end with the lounges and all that. And dispensaries. We see here in Toronto that the police are stepping up efforts.
Once again, here we go. Breaking down doors, crowbars out, smashing of property, mass destruction happening while the police raid dispensaries once again pre-legalization.
Yeah, I see here there's one here, California Cannabis Dispensary on Weston Road in Toronto. 5th time in 3 months that the place has been raided.
Yeah, well, they just keep opening right back up again, but police say that they're stepping up their campaign and they're going one step further, if not 2 or 3. They are no longer just confiscating the product that they find that's illegal on the property. They are confiscating everything. Everything from their display cases to their signage. Big outdoor sign you've got, they're taking that too.
Yes, they are. They claim that the neighbors don't feel safe in the neighborhood, so they're going in and taking everything. Signs, jars, whatever's there, they're taking it out.
Yep, display cases, couches, chairs, tables, they're emptying the store. There will be nothing left. You'll be lucky to find a paperclip.
That's right. That's for sure. And what happens in the end? So far, since all these raids have started, 600 dispensary employees have been charged, and of that, 350 and counting have had the charges withdrawn already.
That's right. Judges, lawyers, everybody down the line is getting extremely anxious with this situation. It's really starting to piss people off. These raids are clogging our courts. We're seeing murderers, rapists, sex offenders walking free because they haven't gone to court with due diligence and it's gone past time for them to have to go to trial. They get to go scot-free. And why? Because our courts are clogged with nonsensical charges such as these that wind up getting tossed. If our courts did not have all of these people in them, we could actually prosecute the ones that are in jail for violent crime.
Yeah, it's a drain on the police resources. It's a lot of man hours, according to a police person. And in the end, you got to wonder if the police are going around. Some of them are saying this is basically a waste of time. You've got the courts who aren't upholding the law, or they're saying it's almost invalid. You got all these people going free. Why even have the law?
Yeah, taxpayer dollars clogging to the court. It's you and I and everybody else in this province that are paying for these raids. Yep. Hundreds of thousands of dollars per raid. The property is returned to the owners of the original property because the charges are withdrawn from the court or the judge tosses it. People walk free. What's the point?
Yeah, that's exactly. It's a massive burden on the court system. It takes officers away from more important things, obviously.
Yeah, Yeah, how many man hours are being put into doing these raids when those man hours could be used to solve someone's murder or maybe find a missing person?
Yeah, exactly. Well, Kim, we're down to our last story of the day.
We are. And companies around the globe are encouraged to take a look at cannabis policies prior to legalization.
Now, why would that be? Here we've been talking all along about, get legalized, get out there, and now they've got some concerns.
Yeah. Some companies are worried about, such things happening as, employee goes away on a lunch break and comes back smelling like marijuana. What do we do? Yeah, I see that. 70% of human resource professionals have that concern. Yeah. Kind of odd concern, I think.
Yeah.
You have that problem now, then that's something that you're going to need to address. I don't think there's going to be this huge onset and rush for people to just start consuming cannabis during the average work day once legalization comes. I don't think it's going to materialize the way that these people fear it will.
Yeah, well, it come down to policies. It's pretty straightforward. I look at it, there's workplace and safety laws and stuff like that don't allow alcohol to be consumed at work, and so it's against the law. Companies don't allow it, so I can't see them saying, "Oh yeah, okay, you can go ahead and consume cannabis before you go to work." No, they're going to have laws, or they're going to have regulations, or your rules within the companies that doesn't allow that. And if someone's drinking at work, they're taking a chance. If someone's consuming cannabis, at work, they're taking a chance.
Yeah, to me, I think it's all they've got to do is change a couple of words in their official policy and change it from consuming alcohol to consuming any intoxicants. Period. You can't come to work intoxicated. It should be a pretty simple thing, unless you've got employees on a regular basis coming to work after going for their liquid lunch, so to speak, well, then you've already got an issue that you need to address. And it doesn't really have anything to do with cannabis.
Correct. Exactly.
People are going to do these things. They're going to be, drunk or intoxicated at work. Whether it be cannabis or alcohol, that's a company policy that company issue you need to address right away. I don't think it's going to be an increased need for that because cannabis became legal.
Correct. And don't forget, patients are obligated to be what's the word I'm looking for there?
Disclosed.
They're supposed to be. You can't fire somebody because they're using medical cannabis at work. They are supposed to be, made accommodated.
Yes.
Yeah,
yes.
Accommodations have to be made for them. So.
Yes, absolutely. That is correct.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, Kim. Well, that's the last story of the day. We got her in an hour.
We did. It was a busy week in cannabis.
It sure was. And there's other articles that we had to throw off to the side because we just didn't have enough time. We knew
Try and get them in next week. We'll see.
Yes, that's right. Okay, in closing, I'd like to say thank you for listening to the Reefer Reporters broadcast live here at lifestyleradio.net. And if you enjoyed it, please share it like you would a tray of infused treats. Until next time, don't forget, educate, medicate, do not incarcerate.
So what are you doing? Nothing. Why not?
Trying to get on this Lifestyle Radio website.
Sounds like a cool website.
I was waiting for your
You're listening to Lifestyle Radio.
The opinions expressed during this show are those of the individual participants and do not necessarily reflect the opinions of their associated organizations or Lifestyle Radio.